things are getting so bad in England that even the bleeding heart liberals are finding themselves going, oh, this isn't really what I intended, and yet this is the consequence that we have. This is a long and interesting post from Stephen Knight, who goes by the Godless Spellchecker. He has a podcast, go check him out. He's a really nice chap. I've met him on several occasions now, and he's just a very polite gentleman. He comes from the era of the kind of new atheist, late 2000s, early 2010s consensus of liberalism. And so he describes himself in the beginning as, I'm a bleeding heart liberal, I'm pro-immigration, I love the fact that the country I live in offers asylum to the oppressed. So he's a fully paid up card-carrying member of being liberal, and yet, even now, we've got to the point where even the sort of like, I think he'd probably call himself a yimby, to be honest, not a nimby. But even he's like, well, things have just gone far too far, haven't they? And so we'll look into his reasoning here. He says, my life and surroundings are better because of the people whose parents or grandparents came to the UK from the Middle East or Africa. Despite cultural differences of skin colour, they were still primarily British. And in previous generations, you could probably argue that. I mean, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s, there were people who were not ethnically British in Britain who had just were always around and just were considered and just not really thought of as being any different, because culturally they were identical, because they didn't have the sort of numbers to create ethnic enclaves, and so these people had to be integrated. Moreover, like, American black culture didn't seem to have infected the black community and the sort of ethnic minority communities in the way it has now. Like, the one thing that it just genuinely drives me crazy is how American the ethnic minorities are these days, and I'm sure that this is a consequence of the internet primarily. But I mean, it just creates a chasm of difference between them and us. And so in his day, that hadn't happened. And I'm roughly the same age as him, I would say. I'm probably a little bit older. But I remember it too, and it was different. He says, as a working class kid, I was part of the first generations to experience mixed race schooling and culture. It was the perfect antidote to the excesses of racism from the generation that came before me. Now, this is one of the problems I have with the liberals, because, well, the generations before you were the ones who allowed this to happen. I mean, they voted against it, and then your generation voted against it, and the generations who come after us will vote against it, and yet it will still continue to happen. But they were the ones who were tolerant of the parents of the children you went to school with, and didn't drive them into the sea. They weren't kicked out of the country. So how racist could they really have been? But what does this even mean? Right? What this means is to become more and more not British, more and more not part of this place, more and more liberal, more and more the atomized individual man who comes from nowhere and has allegiance to nothing. And I'm going to segue into a little story of one time at a conference. And I just want to be very clear. I like Stephen. I'm not in any way attacking him. Right? I just want everyone to be well aware. Right? But we're at a conference, and it's me and Stephen were the only Englishmen at the conference, as far as I recall. There were lots of Americans there, some Australians, some people from all over the place. It's probably back in like 2017, 2018, something like that. And we were, everyone was drinking, and I can't remember exactly what the conversation was, but it turned to what we were. And so I, not thinking, said, well, we're Englishmen, aren't we, Stephen? And he said, no, we're individuals. And I was completely taken aback. And there was this weird moment of like, I don't know how to describe it. Just a kind of strange complication. Because up until that point, we got on really, really well, obviously. And like, I don't know whether I'd done it or whether he'd done it. And again, I'm not trying to cast any aspersions. Seems a very honourable gentleman, as far as I can tell. But there was something weird suddenly, and I was like, oh right, okay. Like I'd done something, I'd said something inappropriate. And the next day, I was like, is everything all right? He said, yeah, no, everything's totally fine. And, just to make sure there was no bad blood between us or anything like that. And everything was totally fine. But that was one of those things that really stuck in my mind. I was just like, but we are Englishmen. Like, and back then I was a liberal as well, remember? And I had thought that being liberal was compatible with a national identity. Well, that interaction, like I said, sticks in my mind because it kind of isn't. And Stephen wasn't thinking in these terms or anything, but this is just the natural place that liberalism ends up going to, because I'd said we're Englishmen, and he said, no, we're individuals. It's like, well, yeah, technically we're all individuals, obviously, but we are from a time, a place, and a civilization, and we have a collective identity. And, I mean, everyone there obviously recognised us as Englishmen, so I was just... And at the time, I didn't really know much about liberalism, really, the roots of it and what the purpose of it was. And so this really struck me. And honestly, I'd probably put it as one of my formative experiences as to shaking me out of the liberal mindset. Like, again, at the time, it was a really small thing, and I didn't understand it. And, you know, Stephen obviously didn't mean anything bad by it or anything like that. But it became apparent. I was like, right, okay, but we are someone. Like, we are collectively some people from somewhere. We are not just individuals. And this is what the perfect antidote to the excesses of racism from the generation before me. This is what this is talking about. The freeing people from the bonds of being attached to their own particularities. We aren't just interchangeable universal human beings. We are actually from a time, a place, and a culture, and we have habits integrated into us. Because in the last analysis, racist will mean belonging to a race. The ist of it means belonging to that thing in the very final analysis. So if you feel that you are of a place and a time and a people, and you think that the continuum of that people is worthy and something to care about, eventually they will drill you down saying, yes, you are a racist. That's what this basically comes down to. And that's not generally how racist is used. Obviously, racist is used to mean bad person. You know, if it was to mean someone who hates people from other races, then there are very, very few racists. However, when it's used by the left to just say, you're a bad person, well, which it mostly is, well, what Stephen has done here is kind of stigmatized all of the generations that came before him. And it's not that they were bad people. What they were is of a race. They were of a group of people who had a continuum in time. And so this has been a sort of way that the liberals have tried to leverage us out of our own civilizations. And so I'm not saying just go around waving a flag saying I am a racist. Obviously, that's not what you are. But what you are is of a people and a place. And they will try and use the word racist to leverage you out of that. And you have to be aware of that in advance. You are from a place and you are part of a people. And it doesn't make you a bad person to say it, even if they call you a racist. Anyway, so Stephen carries on. But that is not what is happening now, as in, like, slowly liberating us from liberalism, liberating us from our inherited ancestry. What is happening now is completely different. A large, undefined number of foreign fighting-age men are being transplanted into working-class towns. So this is where, actually, Stephen reveals he is from a time and a place, because, like he says, he was a working-class kid. And again, there's nothing wrong with having a small number of people who are not English or anything like that. That's not a problem. And it never used to be a problem. But the assumption that underpinned it was, well, they're just universal people just like us, right? And they can just sit in the same place and live in the same area, join the same classes, follow the same rules, and then they are in all shapes and in all forms the same as us. Well, if you've got that assumption, then why does the quantity matter? The quantity actually doesn't matter, because if all people are actually a universal human type, then it doesn't matter where they are, or where they're from, or how many come, because that's something that is genuinely universal. It has no limits. But Stephen is bumping into the untruth of that liberal assumption, is that actually we're not universal. Actually, numbers do matter. Actually, the kind of people matter as well. And so if you bring a large undefined number of foreign fighting age men to be transplanted into working class communities, the way that the previous generations of immigrants had integrated is not possible. Because what was actually happening, it wasn't atomic, free-floating individual human beings, universal human beings, who are just randomly popping up in our towns. What was happening is foreign people were coming over and joining our tribe by integrating manually, as in like living in the community, like being, working in the jobs, going to the pubs, marrying an English woman, like, or an English man, like actually integrating into the tribe. And so, yeah, when you have like small numbers of people who come to a new place, yes, you can integrate them into a tribe. And there's nothing wrong with integrating them into a tribe. In fact, that's what you should be doing when you have a small number of foreigners there. But when you bring a large number of people who are not even inclined to try and integrate, and then you just say, essentially, this is a free holiday, and you're welcome to just go and do whatever you want in what is basically an undiscovered country for them, well, yeah, that creates real problems. But notice how both have come from the same liberal presumption, that actually, well, they're just universal, homogenous human types. He carries on. That is what's happened in northwest Manchester town where I live. In the last 48 hours, it's become obvious that the local hotel has been turned into an immigrant hotel. Tonight, my partner and I walked home from my sister-in-law's. The walk takes 15 minutes. Passing the hotel and the streets beyond it, we were met with an endless stream of Middle Eastern men speaking another language and leering at my partner. She was in a summer dress. The stares were entirely inappropriate. It felt like running a gauntlet. She felt unsafe, and I found myself staring down every man we passed. Good man. When we finally got there, though, she told me, I would have felt really unsafe if you weren't there. That's the first time she has ever said that to me on any walk home from anywhere. We need to stop pretending none of this matters. We absolutely do. And good man Stephen for being there and staring them down. There's another thing. If you... So from the sort of cultures these men are coming from, you can't show a public display of weakness to them. You have to meet their eye and let them know you are prepared to stand your ground. And then they'll leave you alone most of the time. Because a lot of the time it's not really... You don't know the can of worms you're opening up. Because what they're looking for is weakness. And if he wasn't there, well, she probably would have been unsafe. Because it's not like there isn't a history of the sort of men who we end up putting up in these hotels being ungentlemanly towards the local women and girls. So, good on him. And like I said, he's a decent chap, and I certainly don't want him or anyone else to think that I'm trying to do him down. But I think that what we can see here is the limits of the liberal idea. Because really, Stephen's version of liberalism was premised on a kind of homogenous high-trust culture that had certain assumptions baked into it that he had inherited because he is an Englishman, and he had gone through life not really thinking about. And they're only now being properly challenged because people who are not like us and will never be like us have been allowed en masse into our country. And moreover, given status above us. I mean, there's nothing I can do for the government to put me up in a hotel and pay for me to live in this country. I mean, maybe if I became like utterly destitute, they'd give me a council house eventually. But even then, I think I'd be low on the list. The point being, these men are aware that they're getting something that the regulars don't get, and they're getting a kind of grace from the government that the normal people of the country don't get. And so they don't feel like they have to act in any way submissive to the British people, and particularly the English. And this is the result. And so all of the assumptions about the high-trust society that we could end racism in, well, that's all coming to an end, isn't it? Like, this is something that I think people are becoming well aware that things have changed, and actually the background assumptions that sort of 90s and 2000s liberalism was built on, well, they actually really do matter. And in fact, that's what Stephen gets to at the end. These things do matter, and I mean, I would like to live in a nice society where you don't have hateful people running around screaming at each other because of the colour of their skin and all that. And Stephen's always been on the right side of that issue. He's not in favour of, like, stigmatising white people because they're white or anything like that, right? Men because they're men. He's always been on the right side of those issues as far as I'm aware. So it's not that Stephen is wrong on any of that. It's just he's, as he admits, he's a part of the ideology that brought us to that place. And now you can only look around and say, right, well, were the assumptions that ideology made correct? And the answer I think he's coming to slowly but surely is, well, Probably not. Anyway, I keep forgetting to do this, but basically Islander is still on sale. Issue 4 is out now. In fact, weirdly, it's strangely well connected to what Stephen's saying, because the point of liberalism is to make people into the historyless men, the people who come from no time or no place. And that's what this issue is all about, exploring what that means and why we shouldn't do it. So I don't know how much longer it's out for, but once it is gone forever. And I've seen them going for $400, previous issues, on $400 on eBay now. So get it for 15 quid or $23, whatever it is in local currency. Ships all around the world, of course. Get it while you can, because we're not going to reprint these. Like, these are moments of time. And again, what I really love about this is that all of this is the current moment in time. Like, what Stephen's talking about here, we have identified in Islander and thought about in depth. That's the point of it. You know, it's incredibly beautiful magazine, but it's not just popcorn content. It's something genuinely for your mind. And honestly, I'm unbelievably proud of it. So get it while you can. The link will be in the description.